guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Nick and today I'm diving into the Guns N' Roses discography, ranking their studio albums from worst to best, all 6. Now everybody has heard of Guns N' Roses, but if you're a little unfamiliar with them, they're a little American hard rock band formed in 1985 in Los Angeles, California. They're known for their rebellious antics and somewhat controversial lyrics in certain songs. Also, throughout the years, they had some problems with live performances and just getting albums out there over time. And they have a messy history, let's just say that. The classic lineup of this group, starting with their first album they came out with, was Axl Rose, Duff McKagan, Slash, Izzy Stradlin, and Steven Adler. That was really the crew, the lineup that put these guys on the map after their first release. So a lot of credit goes to them. But other members included Tracy Guns, Buckethead, Dizzy Reed, Gilby Clarke, and now the current drummer Frank Ferrer, current rhythm guitarist Richard Fortus, and Melissa Rees. I don't know who she is, but since 2016, she's a backing vocals and keyboardist in the band. So I've known these guys for most of my life, especially their first few albums. Listened to them a lot back when I was younger. So I'm excited to dive in. You guys know the band already, so let's just jump right into this album ranking. So coming in the last place for me, number 6, is gonna be GNR Lies. Now, this feels a lot more like an EP than a studio album. The first 4 songs are live songs that they had previously done in 1986, and they're mostly covers of other groups. And the second half of the album, the other 4 songs are acoustic tracks. Some of them previously released tracks changed to acoustic, and a few new ones. It's just this album, it never really resonated with me. I never really felt compelled to revisit this one too often. The first 4, like I said, are mostly covers, and I find they're live covers, and I find the original band does them a bit better, the original versions of the song, and pretty much for all of them, even though they didn't do a bad job. If I'm going to listen to these songs, I'm probably going to listen to the original band that done it. Even Hollywood Rose was one of the first song, Reckless Life, was a cover from Axl's previous band, and I find their version of With Hollywood Rose sounded a lot better. And the same goes for all these songs. And on the second half, the acoustic tracks, Patience is the standout track here. I think that is the only really redeemable track on this album. Although I do like Used to Love Her, but it's okay, I guess, but just not a real great album. The songs aren't terrible, but they just don't have me coming back. They're fairly forgettable. You're Crazy, done acoustic, is crazy. I prefer the original version on Appetite. It was really high energy and in your face, and I feel like they took that all away, and that was my favorite part of the song. So, and if you look at the track listing, I would give this like a 6.5 out of 10 for track listing, because the songs aren't bad. It's just that, like I said, I'd prefer the original versions. And but Patience is a 10 out of 10 track. But as a personal rating for this album, an album as a whole, I only give this about a 5 out of 10, if I'm being honest. GNR Lies, last place for me. So next up at number 5, this might be a surprise to some of you, Use Your Illusions 2. Now, this was released the same exact day as Use Your Illusions 1 back in 1991, which is very odd for a band to release 2 albums at the same time. I guess they just had that many tracks recorded. And this is also the last album to feature Izzy on rhythm guitar, who was an original member. This album, it just doesn't work for me. As a whole, it's very experimental and different from their previous work. They were going into this different direction with a lot more piano and just a lot more experimental than just plain hard rock. And honestly, this album just doesn't flow very well for me. I feel like it's mostly filler. You got 14 tracks, and right off the bat you get Civil War, which is an amazing track, 10 out of 10. But after that, I feel like it's mediocre to shit. I do not like Get in the Ring. I do not like Breakdown or So Fine, Estranged. How is Estranged a single? Like, I never got that song. Don't Cry, alternate lyrics. You already had Don't Cry on Usual Illusions 1. You put another version on here just with alternate lyrics. Like, make it a bonus track or something. Like, it's very weird to have that version on here, and it's not as good as the original in my opinion. And we got the ending with My World. Apparently they were on shrooms when they recorded that, and that's the only logical explanation because it's a weird ass track, very like industrial, which we'll see on their later albums. They'll increase the industrial side of their music, but yeah, just not a good album in my opinion. You got a few good tracks like Civil War. I do really like You Could Be Mine. That's another 10 out of 10 track on here. And Pretty Tied Up's like an 8 or 9 out of 10. But the rest is all either mediocre to below average. Not my cup of tea. I skip most of them, so I don't come back to this album very often. Honestly, those 3 tracks, I'd be fine with just those and don't touch the rest of the album. Not to say that like 14 Years or Yesterdays are bad songs, but they're just mediocre to me. They don't have me coming back and revisiting. We also get a cover of Knocking on Heaven's Door, and again, it's just okay. Next up at number 4, we got The Spaghetti Incident. I always really kind of liked this album, especially for being just covers. I didn't know it was considered a studio album since it's only covers, but it is. If you look online, this is considered as one of their studio albums, and it's really one of their last albums to feature most of the original members. This is the last album with like Duff McKagan and Slash. They would depart from the group after this album, and it's the first album to feature Gilby Clarke on rhythm, replacing Izzy. Now, what really helped me with my score on this album is when I bought this album, not when it released, but maybe like 2003 or 4 when I bought it, I had not heard most of these tracks, aside from Hair of the Dog, which is 10 out of 10 track by Nazareth and by GNR. They're both done excellently. But all the rest of the bands I never really listened to. Like, I'm not big into punk, and this album is straight up punk rock covers. Like, pretty much from front to back. Like, you got The Misfits, The Stooges, New York Dolls, The Damned, The Skyliners. I have heard of some of those bands, but I haven't really sat down and listened to them. I'm not a big fan of punk. So, yeah, to me, this was awesome. They took the songs, and I feel like they made them better because they put them a little bit more in a hard rock version aside from straight up punk. Yeah, there's not too much bad on this album. There's not a lot of, like, masterpieces or anything. Not a lot of 10 out of 10s aside from Hair of the Dog, but that's just my personal opinion. The rest are all like 7s and 8s out of 10s. They're all decent tracks and pretty damn good, some of them. The only track on here I do not really care for and I always tend to skip is You Can't Put Your Arms Around a Memory. Johnny Thunder's cover. And yeah, I really don't like it. It's just not good to me, not my style. But every other song is pretty banging on here, and I have a good time with it. And we got a hidden track on here, track number 13. It's at 2 minutes and 17 seconds at the end of I Don't Care About You, which is supposed to be the last track. But then this hidden track starts, and it's actually a Charles Manson song. Like, he wrote it, and they covered it, and that caused quite a bit of controversy. But to me, it's whatever. It's a song, right? But yeah, the track listing is pretty great. New Rose, Human Being, Ain't It Fun, Hair of the Dog, really love. Black Leather is awesome. Just a lot of really good covers that you wouldn't really expect GNR to be doing, but it's awesome that they did. A big part of that, I think, is Duff McKagan being a huge punk fan. So as for the track listing, I would give this an easy 7 out of 10. I tend to not want to put it too high since it's not original content. It's not original material. They did cover a lot of these songs, but I do feel like they improved on these tracks for the most part. And I dig them. My personal score would also be a 7 out of 10 for this, so pretty good record. So next up at number 3, we got Chinese Democracy 2008. Now, this was a long-awaited album. This is the first album with original content since 1991. And it's like, and you think Guns N' Roses, you think they're such a big band, they're a big name, but their discography tells a different story. Let's just say that. This is also the most expensive rock record ever made with estimating over $14 million to make this. But that's all because of release date changes, all the members changing, Axel being a perfectionist, and all these added up. This was supposed to be released in '99 and it only got out there in 2008 due to a lot of these issues. So we definitely get the best production value, but was it worth the price? And this album definitely sounds more industrial rock than all their previous work. And a big part of that, I think, is due to Buckethead being one of the main guitarists on here. There were so many that were on this record working on it and left before the release date, like Buckethead himself. But you can definitely hear his presence here in a lot of the tracks, especially the solos. You get that industrial sound. It's almost like, I don't want to say techno or electronic, but he's very experimental guitar player, and it shows on this album. But I dig this album. This album is more in your face than I had expected on certain tracks. And even the slower tracks, I think Axel does a really good job in the songwriting department. And his range vocally, like, he goes all over the place. This is probably one of his better vocally sound records. And they also layer his voice a bunch of times in certain tracks too, which gives it a different dynamic. You really get his voice harmonizing with his own when they put the layers higher and lower. And it just makes for a really nice sound. Probably too hard to pull off live though, but I don't think anybody's worried about that anymore. We get a few 10 out of 10 tracks on here with Shackler's Revenge, Better, and Riyadh and the Bedouins. I really dig all those tracks. They're amazing to me, 10 out of 10s. But you also get the opening Chinese Democracy is like an 8 out of 10. If the World is not my style at all, but I really dig it. Like, it's not what you picture Guns N' Roses to sound like either, but it's just a really well made song. And that's the thing, there's a lot of tracks on this album that wouldn't normally be my style, but they're just written so well that you can't help but enjoy them. There Was a Time and Scrapped or Scraped are both amazing songs too, just missed my 10 out of 10 mark. The failure on this record, the weak points I feel is Street of Dreams, track number 4. I feel like if you take that out, your first 10, 11 tracks are all solid. Just that and the ending. The last 3 tracks I feel are so shitty. They're all like 4s, 5s out of 10 for me. Not into them at all. I usually end the record on IRS around there. I'm like, I had enough. Madagascar, This I Love, and Prostitute are all shit and probably should have been removed from the record. I feel it would have tightened it up. Yeah, I think if they just skimmed the fat off the end of this album, the last 3 tracks, it would really improve on its rating in the metal community and the rock community. But not a bad album, an overlooked album, I would say, and a lot of people probably don't want to hear it because it doesn't feature Slash and all that, and I get that, and how Axel can be a dick, and it's like, yeah, but I still remember going out and buying this album the day of its release. I was in grade 12, my senior year. I remember going out to the music store and grabbing this one right away, and it definitely grew on me over the years. For a track listing, because of the last part of that album and the last songs kind of bringing it down, it does get a 7.2 out of 10 for track listing. But as a whole, looking at this album as a whole and going through it at the pacing and all the stuff I like and where the album does good, I gotta give this album at least an 8 out of 10. It's one I do go back to quite often and is my 3rd favorite GNR record. So coming in the 2nd place, we got Use Your Illusion 1. Like I said previously, this was released at the same time as Part 2 in 1991, the same day, which is really odd in any genre, I guess. You never really see that. And this album surprisingly didn't sell as well as Part 2, when I feel it's a way more superior record. Way better. The other album feels like a lot of filler, while this one contains barely any. They also got a new drummer on this one, and I feel like, you notice, I feel like the drums have actually improved. Even though they weren't bad on Appetite, I feel like they're just a little more crazy on this one. But that just might be my opinion, maybe not other people's, but that's why I noticed re-listening to this record on this time. And since this is a 90s record, you can really feel the sound of the 90s kind of bleeding into the Guns N' Roses sound. While they were a straight up hard rock blues band, now they're starting to add in a little bit of that alternative, like the 90s, you know. into their sound, which wasn't a bad thing. It's just going with the times. Going through the tracks, Dust and Bones, 10 out of 10. Don't Cry, 10 out of 10. Bad Obsession, 10 out of 10. Those are the only 3 out of 16 songs that get 10 out of 10. But all of the other tracks are very close behind. They're all 8 out of 10. Most of them are 8 or 9 out of 10, to be honest. November Rain is the only track I do not like. Again, like a strange. How is this a single? I never got this song. I've tried listening to it multiple times. And aside from that cool guitars at the very end, I do not like this song. I don't think it should be on their greatest hits, but that's just my personal opinion. This is not the Guns N' Roses I like. I'm more of an upbeat type of guy when it comes to them. Even though I do appreciate some of their slower tracks, November Rain's not one of them. Yeah, right away, the album kind of kicks in. It's like, okay, it's in your face with Right Next Door to Hell. Dust of Bones, you get like a different vibe to it, almost like really bluesy, but I don't know, it's hard to explain that track, but I really like the flow of it. Live and Let Die is a pretty kick-ass cover. I actually prefer this version to the original. Yeah, just kick-ass album going through all the songs. Back Off Bitch, 9 out of 10 song. You got Garden of Eden, which is really different, kind of really fast-paced, and it was placed really strategically on this album, I feel. It was right beside The Garden, which I feel like Alice Cooper's the best part of that track. Not one of my favorite tracks on here, but it's still pretty solid. Big Alice Cooper fan here, so that was always a treat. And the album ends on Coma, which has a really badass bass line throughout. Song's a little bit long. It's like, what, 10 minutes long or something. It's a little ridiculous. I feel like they could have made a really good like 4-minute song here, but they drug it out to the point where it's like, you're losing points. But I'd still give it a 7 out of 10. So all in all, I really love this album. I know a lot of people like part 2 better, but this is my Use Your Illusion. And for a track listing, I'd give this 8 out of 10 easily. And for personal, like not individual tracks, when I'm taking in this album as a whole, and personally, I would give it an 8.5 out of 10. This is their second best record. Coming in the first place, you guys know what it is. It's 1987's Appetite for Destruction. What an amazing album. This album is in my top 5 debut albums of all time. It is the best-selling debut album of all time, at least in the States. I'm not sure about other countries. Never looked into it too much, but definitely a record worth that title. And when most people think GNR, they think this album. This is the album with the biggest hits. It has the most classic songs, definitely the most consistent record out of all of them, and it does not contain any filler. I mean, right off the bat, we got Welcome to the Jungle, 10 out of 10. It's So Easy, 10 out of 10. Night Train, 10 out of 10. Out to Get Me, 9 out of 10. And the other 10 out of 10 tracks is Mr. Brownstone, Paradise City, My Michelle, Sweet Child of Mine, You're Crazy, the better version, not the acoustic one, the high energy one. And this whole album is just high energy, it's kick-ass, it got awesome bluesy riffs, and it's an all-around, almost perfect album. The weakest track is Think About You, and it's still a pass for me. It may be mediocre, maybe like a 6.5 out of 10, but that's the only one that's mediocre. All the rest are above average, like from 8 to 10 out of 10, and this is just an amazing record. I remember buying this at a yard sale on cassette with Nirvana's Nevermind, and I wore that shit out. This is really like a party album. Like, you put this on with the right people, mind you, with the rock heads or metal heads, and yeah, there's no doubt you're not going to have a good time with this. There is a few tracks like Welcome to the Jungle, Paradise City, and Sweet Child of Mine, which have been overplayed the fuck. Like, there are 10 out of 10 tracks. It's just that I would never listen to them on my own. Again, just because I've heard them too much. But that's not the band's fault. I was about to say it's not my fault, but it's partially my fault and partially the radio's fault. And yeah, just where you hear it at events and stuff, it's overplayed to shit. But I mean, if it wasn't overplayed, it would still be a 10 out of 10 track. Lastly, I just want to mention Rocket Queen. It's pretty crazy how they put in that little, like, like a sex vocals. I don't know how else to call it. Like halfway through the song, where apparently they actually went into the studio with a chick, and there's a whole story behind that I'm not gonna get into. But that's crazy to hear. It's like something like that would never be done nowadays. So guys, as for track listing, going individually and adding up my ratings for each song, I get a 9.3 out of 10, which is pretty damn amazing. But when you're talking an overall album score, my personal score, this is getting a 9.5 out of 10. You can round that to a 10 if you'd like, but it is one of my favorite debuts of all time, no doubt. It's an amazing record. This is the record that put Guns N' Roses on the map, and I don't feel like they ever topped it, and I know that they will never top it. That's a fact, Jack. You can quote me on that if you want to. But anyway, this is definitely their best record, and that's why I have it at number one. So, do you agree with my ranking? I'm sure that there's a few choices people would probably move around, like Use Your Illusions 2, or maybe even Spaghetti Incident and Chinese Democracy. But I'm fairly certain most people would have Appetite as first place. But let me know down below how you would rank these albums. Do you like Guns N' Roses? Do you hate them? Let me know why. Now let's just have a fun discussion down below in the comment section. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.